When you hire a head coach, and the Patriots hired a head coach, those guys already know who is going to be their offensive coordinator. And you don't do a search. You want the head coach to have his hand-picked offensive coordinator that he's been thinking about for years, that he's already knows the scheme, he knows the person. That's why those things move quickly, because these people are like, I want that guy.
Here's the problem, though. We can't treat Mayo like everybody else. Mayo doesn't have a personal relationship with anybody outside of New England. He hasn't worked with people. He hasn't worked with these OCs. So if you're Raheem Morris, it's easy for you to say, Zach Robinson's my guy. Come on, Zach. Like, that's how it works. If you don't have a personal relationship, then you do interview OC candidates.
Then don't hire Mayo then. If he doesn't have a plan, that's how you get a job in the National Football League.
No, that's a different conversation.
This is going to be my OC. This is what we're going to do on offense. Greg. Mayo didn't have anything.
It's a different conversation about don't hire Mayo. Your basic thought is Mayo didn't have a plan and he should be crucified for not having a plan. I disagree. He didn't have a plan. He clearly had a plan. Clearly, his plan was Marquise Williams as special teams coordinator. Marquise turned him down to stay in Atlanta because he has 4 kids. That's not on Mayo. It was clear he wanted to promote Covington. Okay, check. So it really comes down to the offensive coordinator. And so what we know is that Mayo, according to all the reports, unless reporters are lying to me, I can only go off of the information that has been written about this. Cayley was the guy. Cayley was the guy that Mayo wanted. Okay, so if Mayo had Cayley as the plan, is it Mayo's fault that he can't offer Cayley $5 million, $6 million because Kraft cuts it off at a certain point? Like, that's not an excuse.
I mean, he needs to know. If he's going to take the head job, you need to know, is this a good job? Am I going to have all the resources? Yes or no? If it's no, don't take the job.
Boy, do we have a lot to talk about. But before we talk about it, I remind all of you listening and or watching, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel, the exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network. New customers join today. You'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Greg, let's start with the front office. A flurry of news yesterday and last night. Let's begin with Eliot Wolf. Ian Rappaport came out, said that he would have control of the 53-man roster. Andrew Callahan followed up, saying that Eliot Wolf does have personnel control in New England. Your thoughts on those reports, and what are you hearing about Wolf?
Similar along those lines. I think Giardi reported from the Senior Bowl that it was going in this direction. It was just a matter of time before they settled on it or started to leak out. Excuse me. Let's just deal with the personnel department first. With Eliot Wolf in charge, they're bringing on Alonzo Highsmith, who Eliot has worked alongside forever, going back to the Packers, the Browns. Pat Stewart is staying. He started his career here, went off to Philadelphia and Carolina, and then the rest is sort of staying put with Matt Groh, with the college, basically heading up college scouting. The personnel department, I really like what they've done. I think they are basically an all-star staff. And these are guys, Eliot Wolf and Alonzo Highsmith, I'm very familiar with going back to my Green Bay days. They are universally praised from the people that they worked with. Just to let you know a little inside baseball. So I texted John Schneider, the Seahawks GM, and John Dorsey, the former Chiefs and Browns GM, who's now a senior personnel executive with the Browns. Alonzo and Eliot both worked under John with the Browns. And almost immediately their first response was, I love those guys. And they can't heap enough praise on both of them. And I think Eliot Wolf is a guy who, probably should have been a GM already. He interviewed for a bunch, rose to number 2 in a couple of different departments. But I think that his age, he's only 41. He seems like he's been around forever. I feel like I've been around forever. I'm 50. He's barely 40. And so I think the prospect of hiring like a 35-year-old GM, especially back when he was trying to get those jobs, it might be a little bit different now because we're looking at, the owners love these, whiz kids and analytics and all this stuff. And I think that Eliot simply didn't get jobs because he looks young and he is young. And I think that kind of stuff just turns off some owners. But I think there is no doubt that Eliot is qualified to run this department. I feel good about him running the personnel department. That Alonzo is coming along with him makes it even better. Alonzo is known as one of these guys who he's sort of like a Mr. Fix-It. He does have a tremendous eye for talent. He knows how to, as a former great player, University of Miami, number 3 overall pick, before injuries got the best of him. He's still that player at heart, and he knows how to talk to players. He knows how to look sort of into their athlete's soul and figure out what makes this guy tick. He can also help. He does a great job of helping the coaching staff. If there's a player they're having trouble reaching, getting the best out of, Alonzo can sort of bridge the gap between the player and the coaching staff to figure out what's best for the player. So in a lot of different ways, he's an asset. I think Pat Stewart is tremendous at what he does. Rose to VP at the Panthers, has a background with the Eagles and how they've done things. I think he's tremendous. Now, Matt Groh, I have my issues with. I don't know how qualified he was to have that job before or now, but there's a lot of help around there. Brian Smith, personnel coordinator, Cameron Williams, the director of college scouting, Pat Smith is going to be there, Alonzo is going to be there. I just think you look at the totality of the personnel department, I really, really like what they've done, and I think they've set the Patriots up for success to upgrade the personnel, which is what we talked about, was the biggest thing this offseason.
Yeah, and Highsmith, when he was in college last couple of years with Miami, back-to-back top 10 classes, recruiting-wise. And if you read up on what he was doing in Miami, he really was, as you explain him, Greg, as Mr. Fix-It. Obviously, Mario Cristobal had the final call as the head coach. That's how college works. But Highsmith did a lot of different things for that program, recruiting, keeping an eye on talent, evaluating that talent, working on relationships between recruits and the program, working on relationships between the guys that were on the team in Cristobal. So just a great track record for Highsmith. And he's been in the league, for 29 years between a player, a scout, evaluator, in the front office. So you talk about vast networks with Wolf and Highsmith, you got pretty much everybody covered. How about Wolf's style, Greg? What should people expect? Obviously, this is the first time he has the job at the top of the mountain. What would you anticipate Wolf's style being?
Well, a couple different things. I think in regards to the draft, I think he is going to be disciplined. He's not going to reach for players. I think that's sort of like the MO. And I just want to caution people because, everything that everybody does, anytime somebody hires somebody, like, for example, the Patriots hire Alex Van Pelt as offensive coordinator when he wasn't in charge of the offense in Cleveland, and they're looking for clues what Alex Van Pelt is going to do. And also similar to his experience in Green Bay, it was Mike McCarthy's offense. Cleveland was Stefanski's offense. We don't know what Alex Van Pelt's offense is going to be.
Right.
Like, you can look at all that film all you want, but it's not going to tell you what they're going to do now that they are calling the shots really for the first time in their career. And the same thing goes for Eliot Wolf. He was in Green Bay, and you can look at the track record that the Packers had, but that was Ted Thompson. Ted Thompson made the final call, and Ted Thompson was notoriously conservative. He never traded up. He usually traded back, took the boring picks, didn't go into free agency at all, maybe a few trades here and there. So you can't look back at that and say, well, that's what Eliot Wolf is going to do. Because I know both of those guys, Eliot and Alonzo, when they were in Green Bay, they were the sort of liaison for Ted Thompson to the rest of the league, where, they spent their days burning up the phones, talking about trades and draft scenarios, trade up scenarios and stuff like that. And I know for a fact that they were very aggressive at that, But at the end of the day, Ted Thompson would say, yeah, we're not going to do that. And they did a lot of work for nothing. And so, I do think it might, and even it's tough to say, all right, well, look at John Schneider when he left Green Bay and he went to Seattle, and he was in Washington at first for a year with Schottenheimer before Daniel Snyder got involved. I think that it's tough to say, oh, well, look what John Schneider did in Seattle as a blueprint. Well, that was Pete Carroll had the final call. Even though I do think there are more clues there in terms of John Schneider was in the position of Wolf and Alonzo Highsmith before he went to Seattle. So I think that's a little bit more instructive. But I just say that these guys are disciplined. They're not going to overreach. They're looking for good ball players, guys who love ball, usually pretty high quality guys. And they're really good at it. I mean, you look at the Packers, you look at where they went from like 2006, Mike McCarthy's first year, sort of after Mike Sherman was a disaster as coach and GM, to where they got to the point where NFC Championship game, Super Bowls, annual contenders with Aaron Rodgers. A lot of that stuff just came through the draft and finding really good players. So I think that's their forte.
We've heard that Wolf is a tape guy. He's a tape guy through and through. Old school kind of feel, analyzing players. That's how he does it. Should we expect, I don't want to say a lack of, should we expect not a ton of analytical work driving their decisions, Greg, as they take over?
It's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I guess you could say that. I mean, when I think of Eliot and Alonzo and even Pat Stewart, I think of sort of old school scouts, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I think football's too hard on the analytics front. I'm sure they're going to look at athletic scores and things like that and have their own matrix for that. That will factor into their decisions. I think they use all the tools available to them, but I think at the end of the day, it boils down to, is this player a good player, and is he going to help us? And I think they're pretty good at that.
We've heard that Highsmith will have a senior level role, senior level executive within the front office. Should we just take that as, look, he's going to be Eliot Wolf's right-hand man? These guys worked together in Green Bay for 13, 14 years. They worked in Cleveland together for a couple of years. And Wolf is really going to trust Highsmith as his top advisor. I know they talk about collaboration and everything, but when it comes down to it, are we talking right-hand man for Wolf and Highsmith? Is that the role?
Pretty much. And, while Eliot's busy as the primary football executive and that has to do with a lot of things, contracts and stuff like that, I would say, Alonzo's going to be sort of his right-hand man, to the locker room, to the coaching staff, has a lot of input there. But I wouldn't say that it's going to be these two guys only running the show. I think they're very good at collaboration. They're very good at working within a group. And I think all of those guys, I think, whether it's, Wolf, Highsmith, Stewart, Matt Groh, Steve Cargile, Cam Williams, all these guys are going to have input on what they're doing. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think that it's going to be Eliot's decision, with Alonzo Highsmith being his close counsel.
Patrick Stewart's kind of the international man of mystery to a point with this front office. We hear his name a lot. He's well respected. You've talked about him a little bit here, Greg, on the podcast. As far as his role goes, because what I read and what I've heard is, okay, you have Wolf, who's got the final call. He'll be in control of the 53. As you just said, Highsmith will be the high-level advisor with him, kind of hand-in-hand working on things. And that's within the context of everybody working together, of course. And then I hear about Patrick Stewart saying, well, he's going to do a little bit of everything. What the hell does that mean? Is he going to be working with the scouting department and being kind of the in-between with those guys, with Highsmith and Wolf working more on NFL stuff? What is Patrick Stewart's role could you envision him doing here with the Patriots, given the names that are involved?
I think my impression is that Patrick Stewart will be more aligned on the pro side, given his background with the Eagles and the Panthers. I think he did a lot of work last year on, prospective trades and things like that, and picking up guys off the street. I think Alonzo Highsmith, given, he's coming straight from the college game, it would make more sense for him to be more on the draft side. But, Pat Stewart, he does do a little bit of everything. And Pat Stewart's one of those guys I know. The preferred line, or what the talking point out of this coaching search and all this stuff, and what the front office is doing, everybody says, well, Eliot Wolf's the only guy who's ever been any place else. That's not true. Pat Stewart has been other places. He's probably at this point he might have been have more years outside of Foxboro than inside Foxboro. I'm not sure of that, but it's very similar. So he's one of these guys who has really good contacts around the league. That really helps out when it comes to trades, cut downs, training camp trades, things like that. Like, going and scouting other professional games. I mean, he's not an advanced scout or anything. He's most of the time you see him at the stadium at the Patriots games. But I think he's a really good resource that could fill the gaps in a lot of ways if there are. And let's be honest. This is a very small front office staff. It's extremely small compared to the rest of the league. So Pat Stewart and Alonzo Highsmith are one of these guys. They're guys that can wear a lot of different hats. Happy Super Bowl to all who celebrate from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. If you're like me, Super Bowl Sunday is all about scoring the best seat on the couch, grabbing your favorite football snacks, and placing some super bets. I love when my wife gets in the kitchen and starts making stuff for Super Bowls, and now that the Patriots aren't there, I actually get to be home and enjoy it with my family, which is nice. So I'm looking forward to it this Super Bowl. FanDuel has so many ways for you to end the season with a W or 2 or 3. Not only can you bet on who will win Super Bowl 58, but FanDuel also has bets for which players will score a touchdown, how many points will be scored, and so much more. New customers join today and you'll get $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/Boston to sign up. That's FanDuel.com/Boston. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
The name everybody wants to hear about, Greg, and I don't think for any reason other than, for many people, concern, maybe some fright on Patriots fans when we talk about Matt Groh. Matt Groh has kind of been singled out as the polarizing figure now in this front office because of his loyalty to Belichick, how he came up, not really qualified for the title that he was given, and that's rather obvious with Eliot Wolf working on NFL matters. But so Matt Groh now, he kind of settles in as the director of college scouting for all intents and purposes. First question about Matt Groh, and I know people want to know this. It's going to be a collaboration, as we've said. But how much of Matt Groh's power, if he even had power to begin with, how much of that is going to be usurped by this new structure? Like, is he fourth or fifth on the totem pole now? Has he really taken a hit over the last day or two, given what we found out?
Well, I mean, I assume you mean in terms of when the Patriots make a personnel decision, whether that's the draft or free agency or a trade, what percentage is Matt Groh in that decision? So, right. I mean, he's going to be on the college scouting side. And let me just, because I forgot this, let me just also say, just to show, Pat Stewart, the number of hats that he wears, like he was at the Senior Bowl with Matt Groh in the front office. Like he wasn't back, doing pro personnel stuff. So that's just interesting to note. I just think that Pat knows what he's doing, and so he does that. But back to Groh. In terms of the number 3 overall pick, when they decide to do that or what they decide to do that, I would say that that Matt Groh would be in that decision probably 33%. I mean, I think a bulk of it, it's going to be, Eliot Wolf and Alonzo Highsmith sort of taking the information from Matt Groh. They're all going to stack the board together, and Matt Groh is going to have input on that. But Eliot Wolf and Alonzo Highsmith know what they're doing as well. So I don't see to me, when those decisions are made, I'm putting it on Eliot Wolf. He's going to be the primary football executive. It's going to be his name on everything.
Could you see Groh gone within the next 6 months or so? I don't know his contract status, but
right.
Or do you think they'll stand by him?
That's a really good question that I hadn't really thought about. I think a lot of it would have to. It'll depend on what happens with the cycle, with free agency first and then the draft. And I think it's a two-way street. Does Eliot Wolf, does he like the vibe? Does Macro feel passed over? Again, I think we've talked about it before. Most of these guys in the front office, their contracts run through the draft because they've been working on the draft all year. They have proprietary information, and you just don't want people walking out the door and going to, say, the Bills and telling you, like, oh, well, this is the way our board was when I got let go. So I think it'll be a two-way street. Does Macro feel passed over? Does he like the situation? Could he have a chance with somebody else, like a former Patriot, like Monty Austinfort or something like that? We'll have to see. But I would say I think that's up in the air. I wouldn't say he's definitively here. Could be, but I think it's more of a trial and error period for a lot of people.
It is easy to say at this point that if this was a cage match between Wolf and Groh, Wolf obviously won it. And he takes the championship, and Groh's the guy that gets his shoulders pinned to the mat. So you do wonder how he's going to react to that. Maybe he had his fixings on this idea of Bill Belichick landing somewhere else and him having a similar position with Bill as he had here in New England, and now that's been shot, at least for this season. As far as Groh's role, so director of college scouting, I don't want to bore people here, but just let's give them an idea as to maybe some of the responsibilities that Groh will have in that position.
Well, I assume he's going to oversee the whole college department, and so the area scouts and stuff like that. I mean, he's there accumulating the reports, putting that in the Patriots system, stacking the board, preliminary stack. Basically, he provides, when they meet as a group, he provides the recommendation of the college department. This is where we see the guys. This is what he basically oversees the whole department and accumulates all the information.
And then you have Steve Cargile and Cam Williams underneath him, correct?
Yes, Steve Cargile. At last we know of, he was director of pro scouting, but all those guys get involved in the draft because once free agency's over, pretty much the pro stuff's done, and now you're looking at the draft.
So to just kind of wrap it all up with what Greg has said here over the past 15, 20 minutes. The way the structure is going to work, look, they're going to collaborate, and that means, hey, everybody's voice is going to be heard. You're going to sit in the room, you're going to throw your opinions out there, you're going to have your own thoughts on each player, and, when it comes to college especially, you'll talk to Groh and Cargile and Cam Williams, and Patrick Stewart will be involved. When it comes to NFL personnel and free agency, you're mostly looking at Wolf and Highsmith along with Patrick Stewart as well. So if you want to try to put together a power structure, I would take it. It's really Wolf, Highsmith, Stewart, Groh, Cargile / Williams. That's kind of what we're looking at when it comes to influence within this organization. Another question I have for you, Greg, before we get into Gerard Mayo's contract situation. How does he play within all of this? Where is Mayo's voice? Would you put Mayo's voice alongside Eliot Wolf's, alongside Highsmith's? Or is he along the lines of, the Patrick Stewarts of the world? I've got to imagine he's absolutely above the college cats. Where would you put Mayo in all of that?
I would put somewhere around Highsmith. I mean, I think he has input. He's going to be coaching the team. The team needs to take on the personality of the head coach. So I think he's going to have say for sure, but at the end of the day, and I don't know this, but I'm just putting myself in the place of Eliot Wolf. I get my first shot at this after years when I think I should have had the shot. I'm doing it my way. Like I'm picking the players that I want to pick, and I'm putting my stamp on it. And collaboration is nice to a point, but Eliot's very good. He's a great guy. Like, he's going to make everybody feel valued and hear that their voice is being heard. But at the end of the day, Wolf's got to make the call. He's going to be in that position. It's going to his name on it, and it's his show.
2 more questions for you. The process of getting to where they got to here with Wolf. The Rooney Rule exists in the front office as well. Is there something that we're missing here? Were there interviews that were done and we haven't heard about them? Or is this some kind of, trickeration with the contract and Wolf's title, and Kraft found a loophole where he could just slide Wolf on up and it is what it is?
It's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. I could just tell you my personal feelings on it. And it was, somewhat similar to the Gerard Mayo situation. And, look, I know the simpletons out there will be like, well, we hired a black head coach, so didn't the Rooney Rule work? Like, that's not the purpose of the Rooney Rule. The purpose of the Rooney Rule is expose top minority candidates at the head coaching level and the GM level to as many owners as possible, because you never know what can happen from that. Owners talk to each other and they can be like, yeah, we interviewed this guy, we're going to hire Mayo anyways, but holy cow, he was great, and you should really take a close look at him. Like, that's how things happen in the NFL.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, none of this sits well with me for a variety of different reasons, including the Rooney Rule. I do think, my personal opinion is there's some trickeration going on in terms of, maybe the Patriots delay making anything official, saying anything until maybe they can talk to some people like after the draft or something like that. But I just think overall, I think the Patriots process with all of this has been absolute crap. Now, I don't mind where they've ended up. I don't mind Gerard Mayo at head coach. I don't mind the offensive coaching staff. I really like the front office, but and I don't know how you feel about this, Nick, but I'm sorry. Like, if you would have told me 3 months ago, and again, we had this discussion, and I said this at the time, like, when we're talking about moving on from Bill Belichick, I was like, I need to know what else they're going to do. What is this going to look like? Because if you're just going to keep the front office the same, which they have done, which is keep the coaching staff largely the same. They were talking about Bill O'Brien, but if you were going to tell me that they were going to hire Alex Van Pelt as offensive coordinator, with Gerard Mayo as head coach, with no searches whatsoever anywhere around the NFL, I would have told you, no, I don't want that. No, just keep Bill. Just keep Bill and say, like, this is what we're going to do with the personnel department. We're bringing Josh McDaniels back because Billy O'Brien can't wait to get out of here. He's right here. Let McDaniels hire his own offensive staff, and I think the Patriots would be much better off. But the big X factor in that, and we don't know it, and it's easy to say it wouldn't have happened, but Bill agreeing to the personnel department changes and who has final say on the 53. It's easy to say in the abstract, but the reality probably is much different, and it probably wouldn't have worked. But for the Patriots, for the first time in 25 years, to come out of breaking with Bill Belichick with what they've done, to me, is just underwhelming, because we don't know that they did everything to improve the organization, because they didn't look outside their own 5-foot circle. So to me, I have a problem with that.
Process could have and should have been much better regarding the head coach and the front office situation. Really don't have much of an issue. I know we're going to get into the coaching staff. Don't have much of an issue with how the OC thing was handled. Don't have an issue with the defensive coordinator, because they talked to several guys about the defensive coordinator position, and special teams is special teams. So it really comes down to the front office and head coach, and I think they should have had searches. I tend to agree with you, Greg, though, and I know I wrote about this at BSJ last week. When all is said and done, when you look at the results and you look at what the rest of the league has done, it's not like I say, oh, man, the Patriots, what they ended up with, they got outclassed. I just don't. I think the league and the owners are going a certain way. It's a copycat league. And outside of Jim Harbaugh, outside of Jim, what hire is like, oh, woo, knock my socks off? I don't think anybody was getting all hot and bothered over Dave Canales 2 months ago. So, and that's all with all due respect to Dave. He might do a fantastic job. I hope he does for himself and his family. But, I just, the process could have been better. I don't think there's much of a debate there. I am interested to see if anything comes out as far as what that process was with the front office. We heard that Mayo spoke to people externally. Now, I know you pushed back on that and said, well, guys have titles and you got to do it a fit. And I understand all of that. But, what were those conversations? Who did he talk to? Obviously, the Highsmith hire, they could easily go back to the NFL and say, oh, yeah, we interviewed Highsmith to be the director of player personnel, and we just decided to elevate Eliot. So there's a couple of ways they can get through with this. I do think it's a break when you have Bill Belichick making the final calls and you don't have that GM title, so you can have this fluidity. I also wonder, as far as time goes, if you were going to go, full throttle, so to speak, to use Tom Werner's terrible expression, if you went full throttle with head coach and GM, that might have taken a pretty long time. Washington just got their head coach, and they brought in Adam Peters really early. So, how long would that have taken? You've got a lot of decisions to make here with this football team. About 1/3 of your roster is walking to free agency. So there's a lot of stuff you got to sift through. And I wonder if they looked at it from an efficiency standpoint, which brings me to this. You mentioned the staff is still small. The possibility / probability, Greg, of them maybe adding an outside voice or voices once the draft is over.
Yeah, I think that's certainly possible. I think they could bring in, certain guys like, Ziegler or Robinson who've been around, who know some of these guys and know the way the Patriots way of doing things. Do I think they're going to bring in some sort of like football czar or something at some point? Probably not, but I think basically they're going to try to get through this period, which of course is one of the most crucial in Patriots history. So I don't like it being a petri dish for what's going to go on with the Patriots long term, but I could see them getting through this and Eliot or Mayo or whoever, in combination talking to the Krafts and say, like, look, we've been through this. This is what we need to do. And we need you guys to sign off on this and also bankroll it, which I do think is sort of the elephant in the room, how much the Krafts want to bankroll much of anything at this point.
All right, let's get back to Mayo. You were on Felger Maz yesterday, and you mentioned something about a $10 million buyout. Tell the fine people about it.
So, I'm just doing sports talk radio and just telling people, I wasn't writing a story or anything like that or sourcing or anything. So this isn't fact-based, but I can tell you multiple people at the Senior Bowl told me that the talk around the league is that Jerod Mayo's buyout was $10 million. If the Krafts decided that they didn't want to go with the succession plan and they wanted to, say, hire Mike Vrabel or something like that, not only were the Krafts going to have to pay off Bill Belichick, which is probably about $25 million, they were going to have to cut Jerod Mayo a check for $10 million. And so that's what I told them, and that's sort of the status of it. I'm just incredulous about this. I think I'll just say this: the Krafts better be right on everything that they do. If this gets worse, if this is bad, it's on the Krafts, 100%. Not only was it ridiculous to give Jerod Mayo the succession language when the only time it's been used before is with planned retirements, with almost universally guys who had contract offers to be head coaches in the National Football League, but they didn't want to leave and they wanted to succeed their boss. But here, in this case, for whatever reason, the Krafts decided to give Jerod Mayo that contract language when Bill Belichick wasn't retiring anytime soon, has never even talked about retirement, and he never came close to a head coaching offer. So not only did they put that language in, but they give him a $10 million buyout. I mean, who the F are we kidding? Like, what were they doing? Who were they competing against? What the hell are they doing? What was so great about Gerard Mayo that they couldn't let him go be a DC or something like someplace else? Nobody was hiring Gerard Mayo to be their head coach. So to me, I don't know if it's the Krafts believing in Gerard Mayo this much or Gerard Mayo pulling the wool over the Krafts' eyes, or a combination of both. But whatever it is, if this does not go well, we will look back and just be like, what the hell were the Krafts doing?
Yeah, it's bananas, man. It's straight up bananas. And I don't understand it. I don't understand the urgency that they showed with this. The way they handled Mayo, he's got to be, in their eyes, like a future Hall of Fame coach. To go through everything that they went through with him, to have it in writing, to, have a buyout, even if it's not $10 million, if it's, even if it's 5, 6, 7, whatever it is, to have a buyout is like, man, oh man, like you must be smitten with this dude. And that trip to Israel did some wonders. On a side note, shout out to Gerard Mayo. I'm going to separate the handling of Mayo and give the man some credit. My man, they say he's really good in the business world. My man cut a hell of a deal here. He got his name on that paper to succeed, the greatest coach of all time, and got a multi-million-dollar buyout without being a defensive coordinator. Shout out to you, Gerard, and whoever is your agent or whoever was advising you at the time. Man, oh man, that is putting in some work. That is impressive. I don't get it.
The game is the game, no doubt.
Yeah, no doubt about that. I don't get it from the Kraft side, but Mayo, you did good. All right, let's talk about Brian Belichick for a minute. Steve Belichick to Washington. Bill Belichick to Nantucket. Brian Belichick staying here in New England. Your thoughts, Greg?
I mean, it's certainly an interesting choice from Mayo. I mean, I do think a lot of Brian as a coach, since he was even younger and sort of a neophyte on the staff. I mean, people rave to me about how smart he is, that he's more like his father than Steve is. But I think he's got a young family. He also had the health issue that I think he's still dealing with, and I think he looked around, but I think the prospect of him, picking up and moving, I don't think it's something that he really wanted to do. And Gerard did the old man a favor and kept his son put. But I mean, it's an interesting choice because in a lot of ways it looks like they're moving on from Belichick, and Mayo wanted to move on from Belichick loyalists. But he's keeping one in the hen house, so that can be interesting.
You wonder if this would have ever happened if Bill got a job. We don't know. We'll never know. But I find it hard to believe that it would have happened, especially with Steve bouncing to Washington. I think Brian would have ended up on Papa's staff. But, hey, we don't know. I don't mind the move, by the way. I think he's done a good job with the safeties. You can sit there and scream about Duggar. I think that's a Bill problem because you failed to fill the free safety role, and Duggar had a really tough time transitioning into that role for, the first at least couple of months of the season. But you look at Jabril Peppers and what he's done. You look at Duggar and how he, kind of came onto the scene and made an impact relatively early. He's worked with different level guys. He's worked with veterans. He's worked with youngsters. He's gotten guys to get the most out of their versatility. And I also like the idea of the continuity on the defensive end. We've talked about this. I have no issue with the defense. Top 10 in DVOA last year. They've been good. So keeping that continuity with Covington and Mayo. And, of course, you've got Brian coming back. We don't know if Mike Pellegrino is going to be around for the cornerback situation. We'll see if that's the case. They still have to fill the linebacker spot. You wonder who might do that. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But as far as just Brian Belichick, I like the idea. You need to make sure you have some continuity on that back end of the defense because Covington worked defensive line. Mayo was a front seven guy. So have somebody back there with the experience to work with those DBs. I think it's a good idea. All right, before we get to the coaching staff in full, you have been bothered by something. And so I want to let you get this off of your chest before we move forward. Because I want you totally focused on something else, Greg. Greg is unhappy with the excuses that have been made for Gerard Mayo.
Yes. Now, just as a precursor, this is a jumping off point and sort of a counter to my friend Michael Hawley, because I heard him on Boston Sports Tonight last night, and they played the clip of me talking about Gerard Mayo and how he shouldn't be let off the hook. That I had heard Felger and other people say, "Oh, well, Gerard Mayo is being set up to fail," and including that in that was, you can't tell me that Gerard Mayo, when he was dreaming about being an NFL head coach and all the plans he was going to have, he was like, yeah, I'm going to get Alex Van Pelt as my offensive coordinator, because they were so tough to scheme against when we whooped their ass the previous 2 seasons. And their offense didn't do jack against us. I'm sorry, but Gerard Mayo probably doesn't know Alex Van Pelt from Dick Van Patten, for crying out loud. But my point is that, and I heard Michael Hawley last night, because they're already making excuses, and Bert's been part of this as well. And I love those guys, and they can say whatever they want, and I have the most respect for them. They do a great job of what they do. But I do think there is a lot of excuse making for Gerard Mayo. I think there are a lot of punches being pulled on Gerard Mayo, and I think there are reasons for that our smart listeners and readers can discern for themselves. But, you can't, I'm sorry, but you can't, at the end of the day, you can't say, well, Gerard Mayo, like Bert says that Shane Waldron would have been the home run hire, and basically point the finger as they didn't offer enough money. Look at Chicago was really aggressive and got Shane Waldron and, gave him the money and gave him the years. I mean, Shane Waldron went to work for a head coach in Matt Eberflus who might get fired in a year. And if it's true that if the Patriots wanted to get somebody, all they had to do was give contract and money. And they probably could have gotten anybody, and a lot of people would have said, that's a good situation because Gerard Mayo's a first-time head coach. The ownership loves them. Their talent sucks. Nobody cares about the talent. They just want to know what their contract terms are and what kind of power they're going to have and things like that. But at the end of the day, what matters, Gerard Mayo is responsible for what happens on this staff. Gerard Mayo can't have it both ways. He can't, pull the wool over the eyes of the Crafts and call them thunder at the press conference 50 times and then all of a sudden say, well, he's not doing right by me. He signed the succession contract language. He's played as a player. He's been a coach for the Crafts. He's been to Israel. He calls them thunder. He knows exactly what Robert Kraft is going to do. And if he didn't know that the Crafts were going to say, we're not going to spend $4 million for Nick Caley, or we're not going to 5 or 6 for Shane Waldron, then that's on Mayo. He agreed to this. He didn't have to sign that contract. He didn't have to uphold that contract if he didn't want to. If he doesn't think he can be a success because of the Crafts, don't take the job. So at the end of the day, I mean, he hasn't even started the job yet, and people are already making excuses for him. No, at the end of the day, he's a first-time head coach. He took this job. So when all is said and done, it's on Gerard Mayo. If it didn't work out, he's not a victim. He's in this.
Greg, I love you, but I can't disagree with you more.
Okay, let's hear it.
Several different reasons why. The Shane Waldron thing, you didn't say it, but I forget who said it. It might have been Bert. It might have been somebody else. But it might have been Phil Perry. I've listened to so much stuff, and so much stuff has been going on. But somebody had said along the lines of if they showed urgency with Shane Waldron, they went after him and got their guy. Then, so as you said with Mayo, we can't have it both ways. Okay, we just can't have it both ways. And I'm not saying you were doing this, Greg, but you can't bitch about no process for the head coach and general manager and not going through the interviews and not talking to people and not doing this and not doing that, and then complain or criticize the fact that they talked to too many people for the OC job. You got to pick a lane here. It's either go get your guy and get it done and go with the people that you love and just do it, or you go through a legitimate process. The OC process to me was a legitimate process. They talked to a lot of different guys with McVay and Shanahan backgrounds. They went through the first round of interviews. So I don't have an issue with talking to a number of dudes, especially with the fact that Gerard Mayo's never done anything with the offense. Just like we want people to collect information from the front office and how teams might do things and how head coaches might do things differently. I don't think it's a bad idea that Gerard spoke to a lot of guys and said, okay, what's your vision? What's your philosophy? What do you think? That's number one. Number two, Shane Waldron.
Can I counter this point like right here?
Sure.
Let's stop here. Okay. So my counter to that is I do think you can have it both ways. First of all, in a normal functioning organization, I mean, if it depends on what route you're going. And obviously they went with the head coach first and the GM. So, a lot of other places you hire the GM and with basically the vision, and part of the interview process is this is who's going to be my head coach. So there's not much of a process after that. So I just think the offensive coordinator search I don't think you can group them together with GM and head coach searches. That to me is different. When you hire a head coach and the Patriots hired a head coach, those guys already know who is going to be their offensive coordinator. And you don't do a search. You want the head coach to have his hand-picked offensive coordinator that he's been thinking about for years, that he's already knows the scheme, he knows the person. That's why those things move quickly, because these people are like, I want that guy.
Here's the problem, though. We can't treat Mayo like everybody else. Mayo doesn't have a personal relationship with anybody outside of New England. He hasn't worked with people. He hasn't worked with these OCs. So if you're Raheem Morris, it's easy for you to say, Zach Robinson's my guy. Come on, Zach. That's how it works. If you don't have a personal relationship, then you do interview OC candidates.
Then don't hire Mayo then. If he doesn't have a plan, that's how you get a job in the National Football League.
No, that's a different conversation.
This is going to be my OC. This is what we're going to do on offense. Greg. Mayo didn't have anything.
It's a different conversation about don't hire Mayo. Your basic thought is Mayo didn't have a plan and he should be crucified for not having a plan. I disagree. He didn't have a plan. He clearly had a plan. Clearly. His plan was Marquise Williams as special teams coordinator. Marquise turned him down to stay in Atlanta because he has 4 kids. That's not on Mayo. It was clear he wanted to promote Covington. Okay, check. So it really comes down to the offensive coordinator. And so what we know is that Mayo, according to all the reports, unless reporters are lying to me, I can only go off of the information that has been written about this. Caley was the guy. Caley was the guy that Mayo wanted. Okay. So if Mayo had Caley as the plan, is it Mayo's fault that he can't offer Caley $5 million, $6 million because Kraft cuts it off at a certain point? That's not an excuse.
I mean, he needs to know if he's going to take the head job. You need to know, is this a good job? Am I going to have all the resources? Yes or no? If it's no, don't take the job.
But how's he supposed to know how much Caley's going to ask for? You don't know that. Maybe Caley had a different idea on what he was going to ask for, and then he sat there and thought, "Oh, this is a shit sandwich." I'm realizing now that Zach Robinson just left because Raheem Morris just got a job. Caley didn't know that. Maybe Caley didn't know Morris was going to get hired in Atlanta. He didn't know that Zach Robinson was going to leave L.A. He wasn't 100% certain on that. So you start to see things happen. You see Morris leave. You see Zach Robinson leave with Morris. And now if you're Caley, you look at it and you say, I can replace Zach Robinson now. So if I'm Nick Caley, I have even more leverage than I had at the beginning of this offseason, because now I can go back to Mayo and I could say, hey, pay me this, because if you don't pay me this, I'm going to go be the offensive coordinator for Sean McVay, and I'll just revisit this situation a year from now. So I don't know how Mayo would have known exactly what Caley would have asked for. And so
it doesn't matter. Pay the freight. If he's your guy, if he's the plan, pay the freight. This is your plan. This is your guy. This is your prince at head coach.
Does Gerard Mayo pay it? Does Gerard Mayo pay it? Does Gerard Mayo pay it?
No, but he works for the guy. He agreed to work for the guy that writes the check.
Let me ask you this. Let's have a real world analogy here. Let's say that John Corrales wants to go cover the NBA Finals. Okay, that's what he wants to do. It's going to cost you $10,000. It's going to cost Boston Sports Journal $10,000. Corrales really wants to do it, but guess what? Greg Bedard has a budget, and Greg Bedard tells John Corrales, "We're not paying $10,000 for you to go. So come up with another plan." This happens in every walk of life, Greg. In every walk of life.
John already knows up front when he took the job that my policy on road trips, and on road trips, and if it gets too expensive, we're not going to do it. We're going to find a different way.
Yeah, but Mayo did not have that information. Mayo, absolutely. Okay, let's say Mayo walks into this situation and says, "Caley's my guy." That's the hypothetical. Caley's my guy.
Yeah.
You go through the interview process. Mayo knows what he has to spend on the OC. And he says, this is what we've got. Kaylee comes back and says, this is what I want. Mayo comes back and says, well, this is what we've got. We have, first of all, no idea what Kaylee asked for, okay? It's rumor, it's innuendo. He might ask for $4 million, $5 million, $6 million, $7 million. Nobody knows. And if somebody knows, they haven't reported it. So if you're not willing to report it, you shouldn't be willing to talk about it. So let's say Nick Kaylee comes out and says, I want $5 million. And Mayo knows that the Crafts are only going to be willing to go up to like $3.5 million, right? Because maybe Bill O'Brien made $4 million last year. Who the hell knows? So Mayo, what's that?
I said, don't take the job. Just like John, don't take the job with me if you really want to cover the NBA Finals. You both agreed to take the job.
But you're mixing John's role with Gerard Mayo's role. Let's get back to the example. Nick Kaylee is entertaining the idea of coming. He went through 2 interviews, so we know that he would be willing to take the job most likely, unless he just loves wasting his time. Mm-hmm. And so you have $4 million. So you offer Kaylee $4 million. Kaylee comes back and says, I want $6 million. So now we expect Mayo to go back to Kraft and get $2 million extra dollars per year to bring Nick Kaylee in? Like, that to me is ridiculous. Like, Mayo is an employee. He can only do so much. It's not like he can put a gun to the head of Robert Kraft and say, hey, Robert, I know we went over this and you were willing to give $4 million, but really this is my guy. Can we go up to $6 million? Kraft's going to say, piss off. Go find option number 2. And so, like, I don't think it's just looking at the situation realistically. Like, Zach Robinson wasn't coming here. He has a relationship with Raheem Morris. We've talked about that. The Rolodex, the idea of relationships. So Zach Robinson was off the board. Nick Kaylee reportedly wanted too much money. So I don't know what Gerard Mayo and his situation.
Who said too much money? Who said I haven't seen anybody say he wanted too much money. I said that he asked for money that the Patriots wouldn't pay. I mean, that's the scuttlebutt.
Okay, well, I mean, whatever. So he didn't ask for too much. He asked for a certain amount of money that was judged by New England. And again, the New England Patriots are not Gerard Mayo. The New England Patriots are the Crafts. When you talk about financial decisions at that level, the Patriots thought it was too much money. I will only speak from experience. I worked as a program director out in Sacramento for 1.5 years. And there's a lot of things that happen in radio. For example, I don't have a job right now, right? There's a lot of different things that go into decisions that are made. And so as a program director, I could go in. I hired my co-host in Sacramento. I was told a certain amount of money by my management that I was able to spend on that position. I got my number 1 guy. I had my number 1 guy in the crosshairs. I eventually was able to hire my number 1 guy. But in negotiations, my number 1 guy wanted more than management was looking at first. Now, I was able to budge management a little bit. But if my number 1 target wasn't willing to come down a little bit and meet in that middle, the deal doesn't get done. So you can only push management so far. You can only push ownership so far. And so I don't put that on Mayo. I put that on the Crafts. If it's a money situation, that's on Robert. It's not on Gerard. And I would also mention that.
Let me I'll just say,
sure,
because we're just going to go round and round in circles, because like I'm not going to budge and you're not going to budge. But I think to me, it is it's inappropriate to conflate the real world to the NFL. They're not the same. And my bottom line, in my opinion on this, is if Gerard Mayo, who was in a rush to be an NFL head coach, if he didn't get in writing from the Crafts in his succession contract that he would have an unlimited budget to hire whoever he wanted to be successful, don't take the job. And I mean, because at the end of the day, it's like when I took the job at Sports Illustrated, it turned out to be a disaster for me. Nobody freaking cares. At the end of the day, I ended up getting laid off at Sports Illustrated. It was my fault. I took the job. Did they put me in position? No, but at the end of the day, it's my fault that has ramifications for my family. And nobody's going to remember. Nobody's going to care what the circumstances were. Nobody's going to care that I wasn't put in position to succeed. All they're going to know is I left the Globe, I went to SI, and I got laid off 3 years later for economic reasons. And so at the end of the day, Gerard Mayo is going to be a successful head coach, yes or no. Nobody is going, unless people around here hold long memories, nobody's going to remember the circumstances. Gerard Mayo might get one shot at this. And if he agreed to take a job where he had to cheap out on his offensive freaking coordinator, then I'm sorry, that's on him. I'm not changing my mind about it.
Conflating reality in the NFL, I disagree with that statement. I think I'm just looking at it as management and hiring, whether it's the NFL at $10 million or it's somebody who's making $100,000 or whatever, working in media or whatever they're making. I'm just looking at the dynamics between management and ownership. And I'm looking at the dynamics between hiring somebody and trying to get a deal done. Negotiations are negotiations, whether it's NFL negotiations or you're negotiating for a carton of milk on the corner of the street. Same damn thing. Different levels of money, same tactics, same situations. I would push back on you and say this as far as Mayo. Then don't take the job. Greg, you've said it. I've said it. We all say it. There's only 32 jobs in the NFL, my friend. And if you're Gerard Mayo and you're looking at, okay, I don't know what my future is going to be in the NFL. I don't even know if I could go get a DC job somewhere else. I might have to go be a linebackers coach for 2-3 years somewhere, then become a DC, then become a head coach. So I can either be the head coach of the Patriots, working with an ownership group that I've known my entire professional life and have that in hand, or I can say, thanks but no thanks, I'm jumping into the NFL wilderness. I'm not going to sit here, personally, you can do what you like, anybody can do what they like, we're all opinions, right? It's just all opinions. If I'm Gerard Mayo, I'm not turning this opportunity down. If I'm Gerard Mayo, I say, okay, that's the guy I want. And if there's issue with money, I'm going to find a way to make this work. That's how my brain operates. And it's subjective to each person. The way I live my life is I'm going to make a decision in the moment. You talk about what happened with Sports Illustrated. I'm sorry. As your friend, I think you're giving yourself way too hard of a time. You have no idea what's going to happen once you sign a contract. You have no clue. And so all you can do is make the best decision for yourself, your career, in the moment when that situation and opportunity is presented to you. And you do that with what you know in that moment. If we had crystal balls, we'd all make perfect decisions. That's why life at times sucks. And if I'm Gerard Mayo, and I have, before Belichick's even out of town, I have a head coaching job on a platter in front of me, and it's my ultimate goal to do that, then I look at it and say, hey, man, I get one of 32. I'm not Ben Johnson. I'm not an offensive coordinator. I'm seeing what's happening in this league. Everybody's hiring these young offensive guys from Shanahan and McVay. Oh, and by the way, I happen to be black. And I know the numbers game that gets played. I know why there's a Rooney Rule in the first place. So somebody with my background, I have an opportunity to be a head coach of an organization. If I turn that down, I may never get that opportunity again. And so I'm not going to sit there and criticize him for taking that job. All right, let's get to the coaching staff. Good stuff. Quickly, just your overall thoughts, Greg. So,
by the way, let me just say for the record, I agree to disagree on that. That's all.
On what?
On the point you just made. Like, I just
that
agree to disagree. One of 32, okay. You need to take that. Like, I
didn't say you need to take it. You don't need to do anything. Mayo could have said thanks, but no thanks. I'm just saying I understand Mayo saying, yes, I'll take the job. Given the situation in the league and how difficult it is to get that job, I totally understand him saying yes. And I would not hold it against him for accepting an NFL head coaching job. I'm sorry, I wouldn't. I would say, well, yeah, it's no matter where I go. Okay, so I won't be able to get maybe as much money as I want from my coordinators, but at least I know the owner. At least I'm living in the area I've lived my entire professional career. At least I know I have DeMarcus Covington on this staff, and at least I know this roster, and at least I know the players that are on the roster that I want to keep, and I have personal relationships with them. So I just think it's to me, it's too easy to just say, oh, well, he should have just, walked away from it, and if it wasn't perfect. No job is perfect. You got pros and cons. Van Pelt, McAdoo. We know those two guys. T.C. McCartney added as the quarterback's coach. Scott Peters, will be the offensive line coach. Just your thoughts on McCartney, Peters, and what this staff right now, Greg, looks like offensively.
I mean, I'll just say my 10,000 feet, I'm underwhelmed by it. I don't think that anybody at any point wanted to employ the Alex Van Pelt offense, but I don't think it's bad. And I like how there's alignment on the coaching staff. These guys they know the offense, they know each other. That's going to be good. So at least this offense is going to be consistently middle of the road as far as scheme and things like that. And then it's up to getting the players. They just need better players. I'm sure, if they get Marvin Harrison Jr., I'm sure it'll be, great in this scheme. And I think it, like we talked about before, they have longevity. I don't think any of these guys are going any place. I mean, you're a little bit underwhelmed because it's basically a coaching staff of a bunch of people who got fired and passed over. But at least they came together. They all have alignment and they know what they're doing, and they're professional coaches and they have pretty good reputations. Stefanski didn't want a lot of them and, or pass them over for certain things. Like, how is he Bill Callahan's understudy for 4 years? And when Callahan moves on, Peters isn't automatically promoted. And the Browns get the offensive line coach that the Patriots wanted, but the Patriots get the offensive line coach that the Browns passed him over for. So that stuff is underwhelming. But at the end of the day, I think these guys are good coaches. They know what they're doing. There's alignment. It's not a mismatch where Bill O'Brien's the offensive coordinator and they're sticking him with Adrian Clem and Troy Brown and Vinny Sunseri, who was a safety and knew nothing about running back. Like, we're done with that. At least this is a professional coaching staff. These guys have done it. They have worked together. And I think that's certainly a couple steps in the right direction for what's been going on here the previous 2 years.
Rapid fire style before we get to the Super Bowl pick. Wide receivers coach, Troy Brown back, or do they bring somebody else into the fold?
Just my guess. I don't have any information. I think they're going to bring somebody else into the fold. Do I rule out Troy Brown sticking around as maybe keeping his title, being around, maybe being more of the returners coach or something like that? No, I don't rule that out. But I think in this scheme, in the West Coast offense, you have to get a teacher, a tactician at wide receivers coach, somebody who knows the system. It's all predicated on steps and precision and all that stuff. And I'm sorry, but Troy Brown isn't going to help them there. They need a West Coast guy at wide receivers coach.
Will Lawing, is he staying on as tight ends coach?
Haven't heard his name. You would think not. Maybe he's waiting to see what happens with Bill O'Brien, who apparently is in the mix at Boston College. I could definitely see Will and actually some of these guys, some of the Patriots going over with Bill O'Brien, certainly as his guys from when he was with the Texans and Alabama and stuff like that. But I think Long's a really good coach. I was surprised that they are looking for tight ends. So T.C. McCartney, who coached tight ends at the Browns, is going to coach quarterbacks for the Patriots. So I think Long stays. I think he should stay.
Pellegrino, defensively, D-backs coach, cornerbacks coach, stay or go?
I am okay with him staying, but of course that's going to be Gerard and DeMarcus Covington's call. I mean, we'll get the litmus test on whether they think he's a good coach or not. If he stays, he is.
Linebackers coach. They interviewed Mike Hodges from the Saints. We haven't heard his name since. There's been some kind of, I know they had some fun, I think, on Twitter X or whatever, but Dante Hightower. And I know some people thought that Gerard might bring in some former players. Is that still on the table, or do you think we've moved on from that?
I don't know about Hightower. I have heard Ninkovich's name being connected with possible coaching staff. I think this is where Alonzo Highsmith, Eliot could get involved. McAdoo, of course, coached with the Giants. He might have some thoughts. I mean, my first thought, if they kept up the Green Bay connections, Winston Moss, who was an excellent inside linebackers coach for the Packers. He went to the UFL at one point. I think he's tremendous, and I think Gerard would love him. I think DeMarcus would love him. And also, I wouldn't rule out that Pat Stewart, there were guys that he worked with previously in Philly and in Carolina, like a Sean Desai, who was the Eagles defensive coordinator, who got fired. I don't know if he's landed any place yet. I don't know if he coaches linebackers, but I'm sure Pat Stewart would have some names because he's where, the Eagles and the Panthers where he worked, they had some pretty good defenses.
Just looking up Desai. I don't think he's gone anywhere. All right, we'll have the Super Bowl pick in a minute. First, check him out over at BSJ, Bedard and Giardi. So maybe Bedard can pay Corrales to go cover the finals for $10,000. You can go check them out for $50 per year. Boston Sports Journal. Great work by everybody involved. And also, I remind you, the episode is brought to you by FanDuel, exclusive wagering partner of the CLNS Media Network. $200 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Okay, Super Bowl on Sunday. The FanDuel line right now, Greg, is 49ers minus 2.5. The over-run is 47.5. I'll go first. I'll go quickly. I am going with Patrick Mahomes. When the spread is a field goal or less, I have a very difficult time going against Patrick. I think Spags will have something for Purdy. And I'll go with the Chiefs. And I'll actually go with the under. It might be lower scoring than we think.
Yeah, I agree with you. I just think that, I try to look at the coaches matchup and the quarterback matchup, and I think that Andy Reid and Kyle Shanahan are just about a draw, even though I think Reid's better on his feet, and Shanahan is worse as the game goes on, so advantage for the Chiefs, a slight advantage for the Chiefs there. I think that you are absolutely right. We've seen Spags in the big game time and time again, even if it's against the Patriots twice, where, he comes up with something really good. And he is going to be able to do that. And I think that I like him over Steve Wilkes, certainly. And I think that I'm going to go with the over. I think it's going to be, I think it's somewhere 30-27, something like that, 49ers.
You're way over. You're way of 30-27. It's confident over from Greg. This one was a lot of fun. I had fun. I hope Greg had fun. He battles Felger.
I had fun.
I mean that was like a sparring session. That was nothing. He's got to
seriously.
He's got to fight Felger and Maz every week for 2 hours. He's Greg. I'm Nick. Hopefully you enjoyed it at home. Everybody have a great weekend. Be safe. Be well. Don't be knuckleheads. Enjoy the Super Bowl on Sunday. We'll be back next week.